Hey guys, and welcome back to another React video. Today we have Detox's master modes and more inclusive space game. So this is the first time I've reacted to a Detox video, but I really do enjoy his content. I think what's really unique about Detox's content is he is heavily invested in the combined arms aspect of the game. You know, he's very prevalent in FPS gameplay, the ground vehicle gameplay, the heavy ship multi-crew gameplay, and has a idea of what the game should be, you know, beyond just the sweaty dogfighter. So I expect this take to be really based. I expect it to be all-encompassing and very unique. It'll be a breath of fresh air to watch this, I think, in regards to the typical content creators that exist within the master mode space. So I think this is going to be, again, very unique and interesting, and I'm really looking forward to it. I catch Detox's stream in the mornings when I'm able to, and I really enjoy his takes on this stuff. So, you know, let's dig in. And again, too, thanks to Detox for letting us react to this. So very cool of him.
Master Modes is the introduction of a new flight system to Star Citizen with the objective of unifying ship roles and archetypes in an attempt to create a new, healthier foundation of balance for the game moving forward. But
doesn't the game look so cool with head tracking? Interesting, he's flying coupled too. I dig it. Risky, but I dig it. And the low dead zone on the head tracking, bold. Usually I play with a dead zone. It's clear that he doesn't. And it does create a way more cinematic experience, that's for sure. But yeah, very cool. I love the head tracking.
Not everyone is in agreement. The top pilots among the ranks of the top orgs and squadrons in Star Citizen who have dedicated their time to the art of dogfighting are a valuable and respected part of the community. And in a game that does and will continue to reward skill, these pilots will always excel in that role. I've been a backer since 2015 and
He has. Detox has been around forever.
Flown and played every flight model since. I've cast Atmo Esports fight-or-flight tournaments, and as a content creator, took part in the Invitational.
Very cool. So this is the content creator tournament they had at CitizenCon, which was the fight-or-flight winners. Cobra here, you know, he was Shadow Moses. You know, his Shadow Moses, hang out with him every night on Discord. Very cool guy. He was representing us for winning the tournament. He got paired with Virpil, and then Floormat got paired with Detox here. It's funny because, you know, we instructed Cobra and all of that, hey, we've got to recruit Floormat. You know, and we did based off this tournament after meeting him in real life. Super cool guy, both awesome dudes, and, you know, they speak highly of Detox too. So cool to see the boys who I'm in Discord with every night, who participate in the tournaments, having fun. Very cool.
CitizenCon tournament on stage just last year.
There he is,
alongside
the boy.
some of the best dogfighters in the game. Now, I'm not a top combat pilot.
Love Floormat, love Floormat.
Oh! Down goes Detox, ladies and gentlemen.
I consider myself at a decent or above average level, but I do have a good understanding of what it takes to be at the top. And let me tell you, I truly respect the minority of players who have mastered the incredibly difficult and competitive nature of legacy space combat in the game, but I also...
There's the boy Schwang too, a massive giant.
Also respect the majority of backers who were sold a space combat experience in Star Citizen that they cannot be part of or simply cannot access.
Yep.
The price of admission, countless hours of studying theory, practicing maneuvers, embedding yourself in a one.
This is on an attack on the incredible work of A1 and AVS. Yeah, so this, you know, the cool, like, so he's pointing out and highlighting here the wealth of training videos and training content for the current flight model. So it's understandable, right? Like when you've got a 50 video series on how to play the flight model, I think what Detox is getting at here is that it might be a bit excessive and the barrier of entry might be a little too high.
Dimensional group and lifestyle of practice and regular training just to be able to keep your nose pointed at your opponent's ship before wrestling your ship's movements for the final rewarding possibility of potentially hitting a pixel perfect box otherwise known as the pip. For the majority of Star Citizen players, this prospect simply isn't fun or a rewarding way to spend their time in Star Citizen. And with so many variables and freedom of expression, as some pilots would call it in the current flight model, balancing and creating space for different ships and different playstyles has become too difficult and uninclusive for the game's developers over the many years of development. This needs to change. That is what Master Modes aims to tackle, and if you ask me, this has been a long time coming and something I and many others have always foreseen. If you know the history of my content over many years, I've always taken part in large events and operations, as we call them, that create space for elements of the game I and my orgmates would ordinarily be unable to experience without some form of player-implemented rule sets. These experiences have been the best experiences I've ever had playing Star Citizen, in anticipation of the day they would happen organically based.
See, that's the thing, right? Is Detox rolls in an org and he rolls heavy. So you can see, you know, they're outfitting all kinds of ships, and yeah, he's really pushing to include all the playstyles and players, right? The player base too.
Based on a fundamental shift in the way the game is balanced. This is what we stand to gain with Master Modes.
Yep.
Yogi and team are wiping clean the existing balance and flight model to create a new foundation that can be built upon over many months and years, bulldozing a landscape that currently resembles a sprawling slum of ships and playstyles, overlooked by a light fighter skyscraper enabled by previous game design. In this video, I'm going to share some of my perspective on Master Modes, the way it affects the dynamics of play between different playstyles and ships, and my current ideas on how to make some of the ship roles in Master Modes work better, including interceptors. If pilots are honest with themselves, the reward and fun of being a highly skilled dogfighting pilot in the legacy model is to sit at the top of the space combat food chain at all times.
Yeah, it's so true. I've covered it in a few videos. It's like if you are smoking people, meaning beating large amounts of the player base because you've mastered the flight model, it's going to be fun even if the flight model is super jank, because you're getting dopamine from beating people, you know, so it's true. It's absolutely true.
In a game where fighters can counter everything, get good enough and you can't lose. So what happens when entire organizations made up of players who can't lose meet each other in space? Boredom, frustration, and tedium. When two equally skilled orcs fight each other now, particularly in space where speeds are much higher and the ability to disengage and string out the fight indefinitely across hundreds of kilometers is commonplace, no one wins.
Yeah, and that's the issue, right? Like, that's kind of my frustrations with it. Yeah, like beating up on lesser skilled orgs or organizations that haven't figured out a fun because you can fight outnumbered and stuff like that. You know, and this exists at Jump Town and like the player events, etc. But I can't fight with our org other competitive orgs because it's a stalemate. The mathematics don't add up. The PvP isn't possible. Everybody runs. Everybody has to play a defensive play style. Because everyone's playing a defensive play style, nothing happens. Again, it's a stalemate. People will quantum jump out to repair before they die. They'll run the moment their shields get low. They will only take circumstances that benefit them, and nothing happens. You know, the worst fight I've had in the PU was a 3-hour-long fight with one of the top 5 competitive orgs. And we had, I think, probably 50 players all up in this fight. I think there were 5 deaths in 3 hours, and I think half of those were crashes. So like ships crashing into each other. And the others were like desync and stuff like that. So that just shows, right? Like you can teach your organization to play so defensively that offense becomes impossible for your org you're fighting at the time. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like the best PvP you can get in live is in atmosphere, because it's the only place that the speeds make sense. So when people are pushing the high speed agenda, understand that you're reintroducing this issue of the fights can't happen because you're creating distance, you're creating speed, you're rewarding retreat, and the fight TTKs just go up and it doesn't work. So, yep. very basic. And it's not something a lot of people talk about, right? But this is like the biggest issue with master modes, is that competitive dogfighting group versus group gameplay does not work. Competitive PvP group versus group gameplay does not work unless you've simulated some rules to make it work or something like that. But it sucks. Like, and I don't think people harp on that enough.
If you observe or take part in these high-level ace pilot battles in the PU, players are barely able to secure kills over long, drawn-out, sweaty periods of time. There is no prior thought given to either side's overall strategy or fleet composition. It just becomes a constant game of cat and mouse, where two sides meet and wait for one another to make a mistake in order for an opportunity to present itself. Don't just take my word for it. Virgil, who is an accomplished pilot in the legacy model and master modes, makes this point in one of his recent videos discussing the flight model, and it's one I've observed over many years.
If you gain awareness and you gain training, it's still broken. You still can't force a 1v1 with an opponent that doesn't bow his head and agree to keep the fight. Otherwise, you're going to get the same scenario where the same clowns are just running away from 1v1s the moment they're under any threat. You can't do that. No amount of training can fix the fact that the 1v1 is only possible with two players that elect to choose it. You cannot force it. And it's the same with a group fight. A group fight is only going to happen if one group is considerably worse than the other. Otherwise, it's a stalemate every single time. So, like, these are gigantic issues with live. Like, the game doesn't work in live. It doesn't.
If there was more room...
Oh, it's so hard to listen to my own voice. Oh, that's painful. But it's true. Yeah, it's true. Like what I said, that's true. Cool that he added that. I love that.
In these situations for interplay between different ship types and roles, leveraged by players of different skill levels and interests who can make a difference, these fights would be much more dynamic, interesting, and rewarding for the players involved. This is why fights in atmosphere in the legacy model are so much more exciting, more closely resembling the World War II in space experience Star Citizen has been designed for, cutting out some of the high-speed, high-energy frustrations observable in the legacy model. If everyone tomorrow reached the peak of light fighter combat, no one would play. There would be no one to shoot and no one to kill and no hierarchy. It's
very much just like the competitive orgs and the competitive pilots feeding on the non-competitive, which is actually like created a really toxic environment where the PvP community for the most part doesn't PvP against each other. You know, unless it's like agreed upon terms or it's fishbowl PvP and arena commander. But like the top orgs in the PU don't fight each other. They don't. Like it's very rare. And to be honest, like that's the entire reason I'm here in Star Citizen, because I want to fight the top orgs and compete. But the worst part is like we can't and we won't because it isn't possible. Which is really frustrating when your entire org is built on fighting competition as frequently as possible and being as ruthless as we want to be. But can't do it if it doesn't make sense. So, you know, we're left in the same boat as all the other PvP orgs where the only decent amount of dopamine we can pull out of group gameplay is from fighting groups that are lesser experienced. It's not fun, you know, it's not good. And it's created this culture of like, you know, the PvP players versus the Care Bears, so to speak.
This is why it is so important to adopt a more role-based approach to the flight model and tuning, stripping fighters of their ultimate supremacy and injecting some much-needed depth into the many other areas of space combat that have been completely neglected. Master Modes is trying to move closer towards the rock, paper, scissors model of balance, where the outcome of certain ship matchups in Master Modes will be dictated more so by the ships you choose and eventually how you outfit, tune, and crew them, with less of the outcome dictated solely by a pilot's ability to push the soft counter boundaries of a single ship type to overcome any problem. Fighters should be the scalpel, but right now they're the hammer and everything else is the nail. Yes, skill should matter, but the amount of skill you can impose on the game around you needs to be contained within certain limits.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, I was on Salty Mike's Answer the Call podcast with Avenger last night, And yeah, that's the big takeaway, right? Is like when people are pushing for a higher skill ceiling or more depth to the game, especially in the fighters that we are, have a long history of being competitive in. It's important to understand that people are pushing for, that depth, that complexity, that longevity, but not just power, right? Like not asking to be able to easily 1v3 group players or, take on a squad. An Arrow takes on an Idris, the X-Wing takes on the Death Star. It's not looking to punch far above our weight. A depth or a high skill ceiling, the complexity we're talking about, doesn't have to directly translate to power. It's just about longevity of gameplay, enjoyment, and all the aspects that come with that. So it's important to understand that, right? Because I think people misinterpret the desire for a higher skill ceiling, and they kind of disregard the debate because they believe that the PvP community is just pushing for more power in light fighters. It's not about that. It's about the gameplay being interesting. It's about spending time in these loops and not getting bored, stuff like that.
The ship's role. You can have freedom of skill expression, but not at the cost of other players' freedom of choice. Buzzcut
Yes.
Psycho covers the rock, paper, scissors dynamic well in one of his videos that I will link below.
The way this concept
Cool that he included Buzz. A lot of content creators don't like using Buzz's stuff, but very cool.
of balance would work in Star Citizen is to apply each category of ship a role. And I will only be using this logic for ships currently in the game. Just what we have now, no concepts, nothing like that. Rock. Hammerhead and above would be your rock. Paper. Bombers would be your paper. Anything which is designed to kill a ship the class of a Hammerhead or above. Think the Eclipse, the Ares, the Gladiator, anything like that. Torpedoes, etc. Scissors. The light fighters. Gladius, Hornet, Lightning, Arrow, you get it by now. This concept will allow for ships to start fulfilling roles and fleet compositions to have meaning. No more omni-role ships doing everything. This would create balance, teamwork, and give CIG a base to start from and expand upon.
There isn't much more that needs to be said from me on this matter. I will say CIG seems to get it. Yogi briefly discusses their intention to fit ships within roles in ISC last week.
Master mode is the thing that makes ship combat exciting and making sure that the ships that you have in the game perform in the roles that we have envisioned for them.
And that some ships, as part of their type and design, will be able to exist between roles, which to my interpretation should provide some room for the freedom of skill expression that some pilots are scared of losing.
That these archetypes are just reference frames for the type of tuning you want to give a ship. It does not mean that every ship that you have in the verse will fit a specific archetype. There are ships which are in between. For example, the Saber. Is it a medium or a light fighter? It's somewhere in between. The Cutlass has not the durability of a heavy fighter, has, however, the turret of a heavy fighter, so it's somewhere in between. So there are ships which do not fit exactly into these frames.
They just need to realize they can't do everything. There has been a lot of talk and fear of a lowered skill ceiling. Besides the fact that I think it is far too early to proclaim the ceiling is falling on our heads, with so many missing supporting features and implementation of master modes to the PU, no one has yet to clearly define what the skill ceiling should look like. And I hate to say this, but I have to wonder if that is because many of the people arguing against the lowering of the skill floor are simply scared of losing a fighter supremacy they've enjoyed for so many years. We keep hearing that the skill ceiling for fighters has been lowered, so what should it look like when it's sitting at the correct height? Is it the potential for a single fighter pilot to be able to overcome overwhelming odds? Sure, but how much? Where does it end before we end up?
I think it is, and I think when people are like explaining a skill ceiling when it comes to the light fighter in particular, they're talking about like really intricate dueling. They're talking about variation and creativity and like a play style and how you want to approach it. Instead of being pigeonholed into your class is really good at this, this is the only way to overcome X. So I think it's more so like, you know, what is whose interpretation of the Gladius, you know, or the Light Fighter works, and you know, how does different play styles interact, stuff like that. I don't think it's just directly tied to power. It's important to know too, because a lot of people don't understand this. The skill floor needs to be lowered for the larger community to enter into it, right? And then the ceiling is the longevity, the depth, the complexity, the research required. Not required, sorry, but that can be achieved, you know, and stuff like that. So, you know, a high ceiling does not mean it's hard to fly the Gladius. It just means you can push it far, or the Light Fighter, better example. And the skill floor just means it's easy to get into it and become useful.
Up straight back in the laps of the...
He's right though. I think I don't think people are worried about the Light Fighter's dominance in the content creator space, but I do think people are in the Discord feedback channels. Yes,
the legacy.
There's definitely people guilty of this.
How do you balance this? Historic flight models tells us you don't.
This is so much more fun than. Are you having fun? I'm having fun.
Hey, Andros wins.
Hey.
Let's go.
All right, Buccaneers, health check. I am green ship, nothing damaged.
Green ship.
My buddy Avenger 1 recently showcased how 4 interceptors with higher speeds and the ability to negotiate a fight with enough time can take out a hammerhead, a ship designed to counter these exact situations. There was also some talk about interceptors becoming the new light fighters due to their ability to negotiate the fight. There are a couple of ways this can easily be dealt with in my opinion, some of which A1 also suggests in his video. First, I'd like to address the hammerhead interceptor matchup. Interceptors in master modes are simply doing to hammerheads what light fighters are doing to hammerheads in the legacy model. At CitizenCon last year,
just want to know too, you can do this to a hammerhead without just being an interceptor, but the interceptor does reduce risk.
I met Yogi, the head of the vehicle experience team and master modes. One of the things I immediately wanted to ask him was about turret weapon modifiers, as these are things me and my community have been asking for.
This is interesting.
For ages, because it solves many problems turrets have. A size 3 Panther should behave differently when attached to a turret versus when it is attached to a ship. A ship's hull or chassis or turret type should provide a passive buff to the weapons attached to it. This buff can be in the form of range increase, velocity increase, cone of fire decrease, fire rate. There are options. Simultaneously, we can reduce the range of these weapons when attached to certain ship hulls, meaning fighters generally need to get closer to deliver damage.
Sure.
You can also simply increase damage fall off at certain ranges, and in the case of the hammerhead and other large ships, as has been discussed and suggested by many others, change their shield to constant higher regen so that more focused firepower is required in order to start bringing down the shields.
You know, I heard on ATC last night that CIG mentioned that armor will solve this issue when it comes to the hammerhead getting picked apart at distance. But distance in the master modes is really toxic anyway. I think it needs to come down, and probably the range of the hammerhead needs to come up, the effective range of it, to the point where light fighters, anything that's shooting at a distance that's small in scale or size, has skin in the game, which it doesn't. But yeah, there's definitely a gross imbalance with the hammerhead. But like, keep this in mind, right? The hammerhead is extremely lethal up close, and it takes playing this very specific playstyle to do well against it. But if these ranges made more sense, the hammerhead is incredibly overpowered. And I'm not like, shitting on the hammerhead here, but just keep that in mind, right? The hammerhead's doing great in circumstances where it gets to use itself. The problem is people are now kiting it, picking it apart at distance, playing the long game.
There are many ways we can correct some of these smaller issues of master modes without making crazy big sweeping changes that bring us dangerously close to the legacy model, which simply doesn't work. The bad news
think he's referring to the ship speeds, the argument that people want to just increase the speeds.
Is, at least as of October 2023, Yogi told me he had no intentions of using turret modifiers. Though we've seen and had master modes a while now, his opinion may have changed since. A1 rightfully makes these same or similar suggestions in his video, which was great to see.
You do it by limiting weapon ranges on fighters, by slightly increasing velocities on multi-crews, by adjusting the ratios of accelerations to speed so we get a better, smoother, more exciting game experience. And multi-crew ships have a fair and exciting experience.
The other problem that needs addressing is the Interceptor's ability to potentially become the new light fighters in master modes.
Yep.
Well, in my opinion, the answer again is simple. Nerf them. More clearly define their role as interceptors and not fighters. But how could that look? In my opinion, the Interceptor's role should be to chase, gang, and finish weak and fleeing ships, including other interceptors at flat, high speeds.
The only issue is the Interceptor, which is the Buccaneer, has a gigantic amount of firepower. It shreds. So the problem with this is that, you know, it's not just useful for finishing a gank. It's useful for the start to finish of it. So, you know, a light fighter does nowhere near the damage of these Bucks and stuff like that. So there's a bit of issue with the hard points in regards to this. I also am kind of against the idea of if something is working well or, you know, powerful, we should just nerf it, especially if it's fun. I think if anything, we should bring the speeds of the other ships up a little closer to the Buccaneer so that the other archetypes have a bit more room to play with in regards to flight. Because if you hop in a Vanguard, you hop in some of these other ships that are the heavier archetypes, the flight experience is pretty miserable. So I would just say, instead of nerfing, maybe buff the others up so that the distance isn't as big a gap as it is. Yeah, because I do like the idea that a Gladius should be able to pursue something, but it's not going to be as great as an Interceptor for pursuit, right? So it's a very careful balance, but I think finding a middle point and kind of buffing the other ships up a little closer to the Buccaneer might be a good idea in this sense. Or maybe, you know, bring back the Buccaneer a slight amount and then the other archetypes up a little. Because I do think right now, you know, you look at some of the other fighters and they're very restricted in the flight department, and they need to stay restricted in the flight department. But I think it's a ratio with the other archetypes, so that's why I think just bring everything up a tiny little bit. Maybe the Buccaneer back a tiny little fraction rather than just slamming the hammer down on the Interceptor class. But he's right, it's a ratio issue.
It should not sit inside a dogfight and brawl with fighters, and if it does, it should be very risky. An Interceptor should have reduced shield and weapon capacitor or ammo capacity in favor of...
Yeah, take a shield off them. Yeah, so then when they are doing these jousts, when they are doing these strafe runs, that they've got more skin in the game. Yeah, I recommended that in the feedback channel. I like that take. It's good.
Increased engine efficiency and escapability instead. A larger afterburner pool and higher afterburner speed, but similar SCM speeds to that of a light fighter, making it inefficient to try and brawl with inherently weaker fighting capabilities when alone. A light fighter should be able to react to an interceptor with a higher turn rate and acceleration to gain a positional advantage and punish it quickly for sticking around too long. Medium fighters with extra hard...
That's the problem, is you can't punish it quickly because of the two shields, the speed at which it can accelerate out, you know, and then the damage fall off that happens with the weapon range. So yeah, that's the problem, is the interceptor has too big of a window to be effective in the gank, and then little risk because they can escape so easily. So I think Detox is onto something here. I think it is a defensive issue in the Buccaneer. It has so much defense with speed and range that it doesn't also need defense and shields, because it also has huge offense.
Points make it even riskier for interceptors to engage.
Like a slower turn rate and slower laterals aren't enough to nerf it. It needs to pay the price in another department.
engage with them, and heavy fighters like the Vanguard with a turret should be able to easily deal with an interceptor. With its higher boost capacity and speed, the interceptor could of course string out the fight and repeatedly disengage, making it difficult for you to finish the kill. But guess what? It's now your interceptor's job, your wingman, their role, to deal with them. Of course, interceptors are also a great use case for missiles, punishing them for repeatedly zooming and booming. This is perhaps where ships with the role of missile boats come in.
Oh, I wish Detox was in the Shadow Moses Discord, because I proposed this too. Maybe interceptors are just supposed to have huge, ridiculous EM signatures so that the counter to them is missiles. You know, maybe part of playing the interceptor is that you are in a battle against missiles way more frequently, because the tracking against them, the tracking of the missiles against you and the interceptor class is far more efficient for the missiles, because you have these gigantic engines strapped to the back of your ship, and so your signatures are really high. I actually like this. It's a very unique way to bring the interceptors into balance, and adds a very unique consequence to flying them. I like this a lot. Very based. And I absolutely recommended this in the Mastermind feedback channel of the SM Discord. Very cool that he came to that similar conclusion, because that also justifies a missile archetype, a missile boat. Cool. Very cool.
Medium or heavy fighters outfitted with heavier missile loadouts to deal with these situations when they arise.
Nice.
Reduce the interceptor's countermeasure capacity, and you can punish an interceptor.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Reducing the flare count and stuff. Yeah, okay.
That wants to repeatedly dance with you until they're dry. Overall,
Man, I didn't even think about that. That's great. Yeah, good.
utilizing this tactic with interceptors can work, but it would be an inefficient use of the interceptor's time, but doable in certain situations. The interceptor's role should essentially be to support fighters in fights and chase and finish weak ships.
Yeah, it's funny. I just did a Master Modes tournament on Friday, and we won it by a considerable margin. And our composition was, you guess it, 4 Buccaneers, because there's just very little risk. You can rely on teamwork to gap the difference between pure fighters and shuffle responsibility of killing players while minding your own defense really easy. So there's gross imbalance there. The interceptors are too strong, especially the Buccaneer, and he's on the right track with this. And I really like this take because it's very unique. People are going to quickly go, oh, the Buccaneer just needs its nerf, the speed nerfed. Yeah, but then it kind of loses the interceptor role, right? Like it kind of loses its personality, so to speak, if you go too far with that. So like maybe letting them have the speed, but other consequences that are severe enough to justify maybe not picking that as well as picking it. Very cool.
They could give the interceptor a window of time where their afterburner is capable of keeping up with nav-moded ships, making fleeing a fight a scary proposition if you hadn't already dealt or tied up the enemy's interceptors.
You could even take it a step further and, maybe the interceptor class is in a constant battle for heat in the engines, right? I was just looking at the major torque imbalance warning on the screen of the Buccaneer, but yeah, like maybe it's a mini game of managing heat as well, so that you don't get these unlimited strafe runs with very little risk, and you're trying to keep the ship from having heat issues. There's a lot of kind of interesting mechanics that aren't getting thought of that could bring these ships into line. Maybe the medium fighters deal with heat so well in comparison to an interceptor that doesn't. Stuff like that. That's very cool.
So you start to see how more clearly defining ship roles and conceding power from others opens up opportunity and creates a more interesting and inclusive combat experience for different players, ships, and playstyles. If you allow certain ship roles too much room to express themselves, you suppress everything else.
Yep.
There's also the elephant in the room of a lack of objective-based combat and purpose for dynamic battles to take place in the first place, which I feel is another fact many players fail to consider. This could in the future come in the form of capital ships, as we saw with the recent Idris event, space stations, high-value cargo hauling, or base building, but I think that is a large topic for another video.
Base building and the economy. Yep, we've preached on this channel how the economy needs work. It absolutely does to justify doing all of this. Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you so much for watching and listening to my thoughts. I don't claim to have all the answers, but thanks to my YouTube channel and you, my fellow meaty viewers, I can join and share in the important conversation surrounding master modes using the power of video. Let me know what you think. As always, I try to read and respond to everyone's messages on my videos, whether gameplay or commentary related. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for your support, and thank you, of course, to my meaty members who support me over on Fourth Wall, which is like a better version of Patreon on steroids. If you enjoy my content and want to see more, feel free to join me live on Twitch or join my Discord for updates on content drops and my community.
Oh, you got to do the Idris event. I could never get into a server with this.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh no. You know, I think my favorite part about that video was how he broke down that once you do acquire that amount of training and you've learned the live flight model to that degree, how PvP, especially in group versus group scenario gameplay, breaks down, and how PvP orgs essentially have to avoid each other because they've figured out that dying is a choice. So I really like that he was highlighting the warts of the live flight model and the issues and reasons as to why we needed master modes in the first place. I think he was very based with this. I think he was extremely close to baseline, and none of this surprised me. Another detox video that did really well. And I appreciated his perspective on this. I think the immobilizers have a really promising future with the fact that master modes is to include more types of gameplay and welcome them all into PvP given their combined arms background. The future is pretty bright for them, and yeah, happy for that master modes is starting to include more people and probably a larger amount from his organization. Yeah, so very, very cool, very, very based. I especially liked his unique proposal to nerfing the Buccaneer, which is definitely something that needs to start getting talked about. The fact that he's talking about buffing a non-existent archetype, which we know is coming in the missile-based archetype, for example, a Miss Freelancer Miss. So I really liked his unique proposal to nerfing the Buccaneer by buffing another variant to counter it, because that's what Scissors Paper Rock is. So the question today will be, how would you guys go about nerfing the extreme survivability and speed when it comes to the Buccaneer and the Interceptor class? Because we definitely need to start talking about that more frequently. Again, love the video. Throw me a 1, 2, 3 in the comment section. Appreciate you all. Appreciate this video. And I'll catch you guys next time, yeah? Peace.